He, a cynical tycoon haunted by disillusionment, believed genuine love was unattainable. She, a discreet and humble housekeeper, saw herself as invisible and unworthy of grand love. On rare visits to the hotel, he begins to notice her small acts of kindness. Drawn to her simplicity, he falls for her soul. But her insecurity explodes. "Stop, Nick. You don't deserve me. I'm just a housekeeper." The phrase, uttered with pain, strikes Nick. He sees the chasm of her insecurity, but also the purity of her heart. At that instant, the millionaire decides he won't lose her and shows that he truly loved her. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning, as it had every day for the past 3 years. Aurora Mendez silenced the device with a precise movement, careful not to wake her grandmother, who was sleeping in the next room. At 35, she had perfected the art of being invisible, of moving through life without causing a disturbance or drawing attention. She put on her navy blue uniform, already worn at the edges, tied her brown hair in a simple bun, and glanced quickly at the cracked mirror in the bathroom. The brown eyes that stared back carried the weight of years of sacrifice. Since she was 17, when her parents died in the accident, Aurora had become the pillar of the family, taking care of her diabetic grandmother, sending money to her 2 siblings who were studying in another city, and working double shifts to keep everything running. She left home while the sky was still dark, walking to the bus stop that would take her to the Grand View Hotel, the most luxurious in Miami Beach. During the journey, she watched the city slowly waking up through the fogged-up window, thinking about how different the world was for those people who slept in Ocean View condos while she was already on her way to work. At the hotel, Aurora was just one of dozens of cleaning staff. Her silent footsteps through the marble hallways, her discreet efficiency in tidying the rooms, and her ability to anticipate the needs of the guests made her an exemplary employee, but also completely transparent. The managers knew they could count on her. The guests didn't even notice her presence. That was exactly how Aurora preferred it. She had learned that going unnoticed was a form of protection. As a child before the family tragedy, she had dreamed of being a teacher, of owning her own home, maybe even falling in love with someone who saw her as special. But life had other plans, and Aurora had learned to be content with invisibility. 1,000 miles away in New York City, Nick Tavara was signing the last contracts of a billion-dollar acquisition in his office on the top floor of a skyscraper. At 38, he owned a hotel empire that stretched across the country, including the Grand View Hotel. A man of striking presence, athletic build, and piercing gaze, Nick had built his fortune with a lethal combination of intelligence, ambition, and a calculated coldness that few could penetrate. His world consisted of board meetings, gala dinners, international travel, and gorgeous women who appeared and disappeared from his life as easily as he changed ties. 2 previous fiancées had taught him bitter lessons about love and financial interest. The first ran off with his best friend, taking a considerable sum. The second tried to blackmail the family when she discovered that the marriage would not guarantee unrestricted access to the Tavara fortune. Since then, Nick had developed an almost impenetrable emotional shield. The women who approached him were carefully categorized as those who wanted his money, those who wanted his status, or those who wanted both. Genuine love had become an abstract concept, something that perhaps existed only in the movies he never had time to watch. That specific morning, however, Nick made an unprecedented decision. Instead of sending his managers for the monthly inspection of the hotels in Miami, he would go personally. There was no rational reason, just a strange restlessness, a need. to get out of the suffocating routine of New York and see with his own eyes how his businesses were doing. The flight to Miami was turbulent, and Nick arrived at the hotel a few hours late, visibly annoyed. His unannounced arrival caused a general commotion among the staff. As he walked through the hallways, making mental notes about necessary improvements, something unexpected happened. One of the room doors opened abruptly right in front of him, and a woman in a navy blue uniform collided with his chest, knocking a stack of freshly laundered towels onto the marble floor. The impact was soft, but enough to make both of them lose their balance slightly. Aurora looked up, mortified, and came face to face with a tall man in an impeccable suit and stern expression. She didn't recognize him immediately, but something about his posture, the quality of his clothes, and the way other employees bowed respectfully around him indicated that he was someone very important. "I'm sorry. Sir, I didn't see," she began to apologize, kneeling quickly to pick up the towels. Nick, in turn, was momentarily speechless, not because of the collision, but because of the eyes that had looked at him for a brief moment before bowing down in genuine shame. There was no calculation in that look, no recognition of who he was, no the grasping glimmer he knew so well. Just a sincere apology and a humility that completely disconcerted him. "Don't worry," Nick said softly, helping her to stand up. "Accidents happen." Aurora gathered the towels with hurried movements, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't see you coming. You don't need to apologize so much." There was something in his voice that made her look up briefly. Nick studied her face with a disconcerting intensity. "What's your name?" "Aurora Mendez, sir. I've worked in housekeeping for 3 years." 3 years, he repeated thoughtfully. "And always so efficient?" The sarcasm in the question made Aurora blush intensely. "I try very hard, sir. I know I'm clumsy sometimes, but sometimes." Nick raised an eyebrow, but there was a playful glint in his eyes that she couldn't interpret. Before Aurora could answer, the general manager, Mr. Ricardo, appeared in the hallway with a barely disguised expression of panic. "Mr. Tavara, what a surprise to see you here. We hope you're satisfied with our facilities." The change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. Aurora immediately realized who the man in front of her was. The owner of everything, the most powerful person she had ever met in her entire life. The blood drained from her face. "Mendez was showing me the dedication of the cleaning staff," Nick said dryly, without taking his eyes off Aurora. Of course. Aurora is one of our most committed employees." Mr. Ricardo forced a smile, but Aurora could feel his irritation. "Aurora, don't you have other responsibilities now?" The dismissal was clear. Aurora gave a small bow and moved away quickly, but not before hearing Nick say, "Actually, Ricardo, I'd like to speak with Miss Mendez later. Arrange a meeting." Aurora's heart raced. A meeting with the owner of the hotel could only mean one thing: dismissal. And dismissal meant the end of everything. She wouldn't be able to pay for her grandmother's medication. She couldn't send money to her siblings. She would lose the small apartment she shared with Grandma Eulalia. Nick, in turn, spent the rest of the morning restless. There was something about Aurora that intrigued him deeply. It wasn't just her natural beauty, although she was beautiful in a simple and authentic way that contrasted with the artificially perfect women of his social circle. It was the genuineness of her reactions, the complete absence of calculation or self-interest that he normally detected in the first seconds of any interaction. During lunch in the hotel restaurant, Nick discreetly watched Aurora working. She moved through the halls with silent efficiency, anticipating needs, solving small problems before they became big. When an elderly guest spilled coffee on his shirt, it was Aurora who immediately appeared with damp cloths and reassuring words. When a child started crying because he had lost his teddy bear, it was Aurora who dedicated 10 minutes of her lunch. Break to search for the toy in every corner of the hotel. She's special, isn't she? The female voice behind him made him turn around. An elegant woman, about 50 years old, smiled at him. "Excuse the intrusion. I'm Helen Carter. I've been staying here for a week. That young woman there," she pointed discreetly to Aurora, "took care of me when I fell ill on the first night. She stayed with me until the doctor arrived, held my hand, reassured me. People like that are rare these days." Nick just nodded, but Miss Carter's words confirmed something he had already realized. Aurora possessed a natural goodness that couldn't be faked or bought. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Aurora timidly knocked on the door of the presidential suite that Nick had transformed into a temporary office. "You wanted to see me, sir. Come in, Aurora." Nick gestured to an armchair in front of him. "Sit down, please." "I'd rather stand, sir." Her voice trembled slightly. "Please, sit down." There was authority in his voice, but also gentleness. Aurora reluctantly obeyed. "Are you going to fire me?" The question came out in a desperate whisper. The vulnerability in that question hit Nick like a punch. "Why would you think that?" Because I'm clumsy. Because I bumped into you this morning. Because..." Aurora swallowed hard. "Because people like you don't talk to people like me unless something is very wrong." "People like me?" Nick leaned forward. "And what kind of person am I, Aurora?" She raised her brown eyes to meet his, and for a moment, the professional facade of both wavered. "You're powerful, important, rich. I'm just a housekeeper who trips over her own feet. Is that how you see yourself?" "It's what I am." The answer came with a sadness that broke Nick's heart. He got up and walked to the window, contemplating the view of Miami Beach. "You know what I saw today, Aurora? I saw an employee who dedicates 10 minutes of her lunch to look for a child's lost toy. I saw someone who stays late to take care of a sick guest. I saw a woman who apologizes for an accident as if she had committed a crime, but who treats everyone. She meets with genuine kindness." Aurora watched him in silence, not understanding where he was going with this. "I want to offer you a promotion to the administrative sector, more responsibilities, better salary." "Why?" The question came out before she could stop herself. Nick turned to face her. "Because true talent should be recognized, no matter where it's found." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The truth was that Nick couldn't get her out of his head. That there was something about her that awakened an interest that he hadn't felt in years, but that truth was too dangerous to be admitted. I need to think." Aurora stood up, clearly shaken. "Of course, but Aurora..." She stopped at the door. "Tomorrow, come have coffee with me at 7 in the morning in the restaurant. We can discuss the details of the promotion." After she left, Nick remained staring at the closed door, wondering what mysterious force had entered his orderly and calculated life, messing everything up with a simple, sincere look and a heart. Too pure for the cruel world in which he lived. Aurora, on the way home, knew that her life had changed irrevocably. She just didn't know yet, whether for better or for worse. Aurora arrived at the hotel the next morning 10 minutes late. Something unthinkable in her rigorous routine. The night had been long, full of imaginary conversations with Nick and decisions that dissolved whenever she tried to finalize them. The promised breakfast had become an agonizing obsession, a bridge that she didn't know if she had the courage to cross. The hotel restaurant was almost empty when she arrived. Just a few early morning guests, and, at a discreet table in the corner, Nick was waiting for her. He was wearing a fine wool grey sweater and dark jeans, a more casual version of himself that made her even more nervous. There was something dangerously intimate about that informality. "You made it," he said, getting up when he saw her. "I thought you had changed your mind." "I thought about it," Aurora admitted, accepting the chair he offered. "Several times. But you came." "But I came." They sat in an uncomfortable silence, two strangers trying to navigate unfamiliar waters. Nick ordered coffee and croissants for both of them, noticing how Aurora played nervously with the edge of the napkin. "About the promotion," she began. "Forget about the promotion for a moment." He leaned forward. "Talk about you, for real." The question caught her off guard. "Why does it matter?" "Because you matter." The words came out before he could stop them, loaded with an honesty that surprised both of them. Aurora felt her face heat up. "Mr. Tavara, Nick, just Nick. I can't call you that, it wouldn't be appropriate." "And what would be appropriate?" There was a growing frustration in his voice. "Pretend yesterday didn't happen? Ignore that there's something going on between us?" "There's nothing going on between us." But even as she said it, Aurora knew she was lying. The attraction was undeniable, dangerous, impossible. "You're a terrible liar." Nick smiled for the first time, and the effect was devastating. "Look at me and say it again." Aurora raised her eyes to meet his, and for a moment, all pretense disappeared. "You're right. I'm a terrible liar." "Then tell me the truth." She took a deep breath. "The truth is that I am the daughter of an elementary school teacher and a seamstress. My parents died when I was 19, a car accident. Since then, I've taken care of my grandmother and my younger siblings. I've never been married because I've never had time for it. I work 16 hours a day to keep everyone together," and her voice faltered. "And no one has ever asked me about that before." "Never?" "People don't see housekeepers as people with stories." The painful simplicity of the statement hit Nick like a punch. "I do." "Why?" The question came out loaded, with the vulnerability she rarely showed. "Why do you see me?" Nick was silent for a long moment, struggling with words he had never needed to say. "Because you're real. In a world where everything is calculated, manipulated, self-serving, you're genuine. That's rare. Or you just don't hang out with the right people." "Maybe." He smiled sadly. "Tell me about your siblings." Aurora perked up when talking about her family. Kaio, who dreamed of being a doctor. Luana, passionate about literature. Grandma Eulalia, who sewed to supplement the family income. "You gave up everything for them," Nick observed. "I didn't give up. I chose." There was a fierce dignity in that distinction. "And what would you choose for yourself? If you could?" The question caught her off. God, it had been so long since she had thought about her own desires that she needed a moment to formulate an answer. "A small house with a garden, where my grandmother could have her plants and the kids could make noise without bothering the neighbors. Maybe someone to share it all with." "Someone like who?" Aurora blushed intensely. "Someone who saw me like you said you see me." The air between them became charged with a tension that neither of them knew how to handle. Nick was reaching his hand across the table, almost touching hers, when they were interrupted. "Mr. Tavara?" They pulled away quickly. Robert, Nick's assistant, was standing next to the table, clearly uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have an emergency. The meeting with the Japanese investors has been moved up to this morning." "They're already at the office." Nick closed his eyes, frustrated. 10 minutes. Sir, they are very punctual and 10 minutes, Robert. After the assistant walked away, Nick turned to Aurora. "I'm sorry. This meeting is important." "I understand." Aurora started to get up. "No." He held her hand, the touch sending an electric current through both of them. "Have dinner with me tonight, at night, in private." "Nick." "Aurora, please." Before she could answer, Robert returned, visibly anxious. "Sir, we really need to go." Nick got up reluctantly, but kept his eyes fixed on Aurora. 8 o'clock, rooftop restaurant. Say you're my personal guest." He walked away with Robert, leaving Aurora alone with a racing heart and an impossible decision ahead. That afternoon, while cleaning the rooms, Aurora couldn't concentrate. Every polished surface reflected Nick's face. Every conversation heard in the hallway made her think of his words. Carla, the supervisor, noticed her distraction. "Aurora, are you okay? You seem different." "How so different?" "I don't know. More radiant." The comment made her uneasy. If Carla had noticed a change, others might notice too. And in a place like the hotel, where gossip spread faster than wildfire, any association with Nick would be dangerous for both of them. At 7:30 in the evening, Aurora was standing in front of the mirror in the employee bathroom, looking at the only decent dress she owned, a simple black one that she had bought for her parents' funeral and had only worn on solemn occasions. Since then, "This is crazy," she muttered to her reflection. But at 8 o'clock sharp, she was in the elevator, going up to the top floor of the hotel, her heart beating so hard that she was sure everyone could hear it. The restaurant was closed to other customers. Just her and Nick, a table set by the window overlooking the entire city of Miami, lit up like a diamond necklace in the darkness. When Nick saw her, something in his chest constricted. Aurora in the simple dress was more stunning than any woman in a designer gown he had ever met. "You came," he said, a mixture of relief and admiration in his voice. "I came." But there was hesitation in her eyes. "Nick, I need to say something." "Say it." "I don't know how to play these games. I don't know how to be sophisticated or interesting, or do anything you're probably used to." He approached her, his eyes serious. "What if I told you that's exactly why I want to be here with you?" Before Aurora could answer, she felt a sudden pain in her chest, not physical, but emotional. An intuition, a premonition that that night would change everything in their lives, and she didn't know if she was ready for the consequences. When Nick offered his arm to escort her to the table, Aurora noticed a small scar on his wrist. A mark that looked old, almost hidden by the sleeve of his shirt. For some reason, that scar made her think of secrets, of pains that even powerful people like him carried hidden. She didn't yet know that that mark held a secret that, when revealed, would test everything they were building together. The dinner proceeded as a delicate dance between fascination and fear. Aurora, initially tense, gradually relaxed under Nick's attentive gaze. He had chosen light wines, dishes that wouldn't intimidate her, and kept the conversation away from the social chasms that separated them. "Tell me about your scar," Aurora said suddenly, pointing to his wrist. Nick stopped with his fork in the air, clearly not expecting the question. "It's an old story. All scars are." There was a gentleness in her voice that disarmed him. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." But for the first time in years, Nick wanted to tell. "I was 12 years old. My parents had died in a plane crash a few months before, and I went to live with my Uncle Bernard. He wasn't a gentle man." Aurora felt something constrict in her chest. "Nick, he drank a lot. When he drank, he got violent. One night, I tried to protect the maid, an elderly woman named Connie, who took care of me as if I were her son. He was beating her because she had accidentally broken a glass." Nick touched the scar unconsciously. "I threw myself between them. He pushed me against a glass table. Oh my God. Connie took care of my injuries, but she was terrified. She knew that if she stayed, he would kill her one day. The next morning, she was gone. I never saw her again." The pain in his voice was palpable. "For years, I blamed myself for not being able to protect her better." Aurora reached out across the table, gently touching the scar. The intimate contact sent shivers down both their spines. "You were just a child?" "I was, but I learned that day that the world is cruel to the weak, that power is the only real protection there is." "And that's why you built all this?" Aurora gestured to the luxury around them. "That's why I promised myself that I would never be weak again." But you weren't weak, Nick, you were brave. The way she said it, with absolute conviction, made something inside him break and rebuild at the same time. No one had ever seen courage where he saw weakness. It was then that Nick's phone rang. It was Robert, his voice strained. "Sir, we have a serious problem at the hotel. A leak in the presidential suite. The water is coming down to the floor below, hitting the convention room where we have the Yamamoto event early tomorrow morning." Nick closed his eyes, frustrated. "I'm coming." "Nick, you don't have to," Aurora began. "Come with me," he said impulsively. "I want you to see what I do, who I am when I'm not trying to impress anyone." The leak was worse than Robert had described. Water gushed from the ceiling of the presidential suite, forming a cascade that had damaged expensive furniture and artwork. The maintenance team ran back and forth, but it was clear that they would need more people to contain the damage in time. "How long until we get more staff?" Nick asked. "Sir, it's almost midnight on Friday. We'll only get a crew on Saturday morning, but the event will be cancelled," Nick completed, running his hands through his hair. 200 Japanese guests, a $50 million contract. Aurora watched the scene for a moment, then took off her shoes. "Where do you keep the cleaning supplies?" "Aurora, what are you doing?" "What I know how to do." She was already rolling up her sleeves. "I know how to clean up floods. When I was 17, our house flooded during a storm. I had to save everything we could before the water ruined it." Robert seemed offended. "Miss, this is not a job for..." "For who?" Aurora stared at him with surprising authority. "I've worked at this hotel for 3 years. I know every corner, every material, every way to solve problems that you can't even imagine. Now go get the equipment or stay there discussing while the water destroys everything." Nick watched, fascinated, as Aurora took command of the operation. She organized teams, directed efforts, found practical solutions that no one had thought of. They worked side by side for 4 hours, he with his sleeves rolled up, and she coordinating the cleaning with the precision of a general. At 4 in the morning, the hall was dry and functional, not perfect but presentable for the event. Aurora, with her hair stuck to her face with sweat and her dress stained, had never seemed more beautiful in Nick's eyes. "How did you know how to do this?" he asked, offering a towel. "When you grow up without money, you learn to solve problems instead of paying someone to solve them." She smiled, exhausted. "Besides, I've cleaned up a lot of floods here at the hotel. You just never noticed." The answer hit him like a slap. How many other things had Aurora quietly solved while he didn't even know she existed? Aurora. He approached, his eyes shining with an intensity she had never seen. "You saved my contract. You saved... I did my job." "No, you did much more than that." They were very close now, alone in the empty hall, while the team cleaned up the last details. The adrenaline of the night, the intimacy forged by working together, the shared vulnerability, everything converged in a moment of unbearable tension. Nick bent down and kissed her. This time it wasn't hesitant like in the library. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, charged with gratitude and desire, and something deeper that neither dared to name. Aurora responded with a passion that surprised her hands tangling in his hair. When they separated, both were panting. "This can't happen," she whispered, but didn't pull away. "It already has." He pressed his forehead against hers. "Aurora, It was then that Robert appeared at the entrance of the hall. He stopped abruptly upon seeing them embraced, his eyes widening in shock. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were still..." he stammered. The moment shattered. Aurora quickly pulled away from Nick, her face flushed with shame. Robert tried to disguise it, but it was too late. He had seen everything. "Robert," Nick tried to control the situation, but his voice sounded strained. "Is the hall ready for tomorrow?" "Yes, sir. Thanks to Miss Mendez's help." Robert couldn't look directly at Aurora. "Sir, maybe we should discuss the final Details of the event. The message was clear, that intimacy had a witness, and the consequences would begin immediately. Aurora gathered her shoes in silence. "I need to go home." "Aurora, wait." "No, Nick, it's too late." She looked at him with a mixture of sadness and determination. "For everything." As she walked towards the elevator, Aurora knew that Robert was already formulating the gossip that would spread throughout the hotel on Monday. She knew that her life had changed irrevocably that night, and for the first time, she wasn't sure she could handle the consequences. On the other side of the hall, Nick watched the elevator close, taking Aurora away. Robert approached carefully. "Sir, may I suggest that—" "Don't suggest anything, Robert. Absolutely nothing." But they both knew that it was too late to contain what had begun. The secret was exposed, and in a world where reputation was worth more than gold, the consequences would be devastating. Monday arrived like a silent storm. Aurora entered the hotel 15 minutes late, something that had never happened in 3 years of work. She had spent the entire weekend reliving every moment of Friday night, every touch, every look, every second she was in Nick's arms. The other employees greeted her normally, but Aurora noticed something different in the air. Glances that lingered a second too long, whispers that ceased when she approached, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. It was Carla who finally broke the news, with that tone of false concern that barely disguised her malicious curiosity. "Aurora, honey, I need to talk to you." She pulled Aurora to a discreet corner. "They're saying things about you and Mr. Tavera." Aurora's heart leaped. "What kind of things?" "That you were seen together, intimately." Carla lowered her voice dramatically. "Robert told the people in management that he saw you in his arms in the event hall, said you were kissing." Aurora felt the world spin. "Carla, that's not—" "Aurora, I'm not judging you, but you need to understand the position you're in." Carla held her arm. "Men like Nick Tavara don't get seriously involved with women like us. They have fun, and then, well, someone always gets hurt." "It's not like that." "How can you be so sure?" The question hit Aurora like a slap in the face. "Did he promise you something? Offer you more than a promotion and a few dinners?" Aurora couldn't answer because there was no answer. Nick hadn't promised anything beyond stolen moments and longing glances. "Look, honey," Carla continued, "I'm not the only one who knows. Mrs. Davis is already talking about transferring you to another hotel in the chain. Says she can't have this kind of scandal damaging the reputation of the establishment." Throughout the rest of the morning, Aurora worked with tense muscles and a racing mind. Every hallway seemed filled with judgmental eyes. Every whisper sounded like an accusation. It was at noon that the situation exploded completely. Aurora was cleaning the lobby when she saw Vivian Moore enter the hotel. She immediately recognized the woman from the society pages, a 40-year-old socialite, platinum blonde, wearing a designer outfit that cost more than Aurora's annual salary. Vivian walked directly to the reception desk with the confidence of someone who knew she would be attended to immediately. "I want to speak to Nick Tavara now." The receptionist stammered something about scheduling, but Vivian cut him off with an impatient gesture. "Tell him Vivian Moore is here, and that if he doesn't come down in 5 minutes, I'm going up to his office." Aurora hid behind a column, her instinct telling her that this woman didn't bring good news. 10 minutes later, Nick appeared in the lobby, visibly annoyed. "Vivian, what an unexpected pleasure." "Spare me the sarcasm, Nick." Her voice echoed through the lobby. "We need to talk, in private." "My office, then?" "Here's fine." Vivian smiled, but it was a frozen smile. "After all, I have nothing to hide." Aurora saw Nick squirm uncomfortably. Other guests began to pay attention to the conversation. "Vivian, it's not appropriate." Appropriate. Vivian laughed loudly. You want to talk about appropriate after what you've been doing with a housekeeper? The silence that followed was deafening. Aurora felt as if the floor had been ripped out from under her feet. Yes, Nick, I know about your new diversion. Vivian practically spat the word. Robert is very talkative. When he's worried about the future of his job. Nick shot a glare in the direction of the administration, where Robert was trying to make himself invisible. Robert is fired. Oh, don't be so dramatic. He's just worried about the reputation of the company and the Tavara family. Vivian approached him. Imagine what the investors will think when they find out that the president of the company is involved with a maid. The Japanese are very traditional, Nick. This kind of scandal can cost millions. That's none of your business, Vivian. It becomes my business when it affects our common interests. Or have you forgotten that my family has considerable shares in Tavara Holdings? She smiled venomously. I have enough influence on the board to make your life very difficult. Aurora watched the scene with growing horror, realizing that she was being used as a pawn in a game she didn't understand. What do you want, Vivian? I want you to end this thing immediately, publicly. And I want you to behave like the serious businessman you're supposed to be. She paused, letting the words sink in. Or I'll make sure this story appears in every newspaper, every magazine, every gossip show in the country. Your little Cinderella will become the scandal of the decade. Nick clenched his fists. I wouldn't do that. Want to bet? Vivian took her cell phone out of her purse. I have contacts in the press who would love a story like this. Tycoon involved with housekeeper, true love or exploitation. Imagine the headlines, Nick. Your parents wouldn't approve of this kind of blackmail. My parents have been dead for 2 years. Now I run the family business, and I don't allow sentimentality to destroy lucrative investments. Aurora couldn't hear anymore. She walked away silently, climbing the service stairs to the employee bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and let the tears flow. Everything Carla had said was true. She was just a diversion, a fantasy that now threatened Nick's empire, and he would have to choose between her and everything he had worked for his entire life. When she finally came down, the lobby had returned to normal. Vivian had left, but her threat hung in the air like an approaching storm. Aurora carefully avoided any area where she might meet Nick for the rest of the day. Not that he had looked for her, which confirmed all her worst suspicions. At the end of the shift, when she was gathering her belongings, she found a note in her locker. She recognized Nick's elegant handwriting. We need to talk. Meet me in the parking lot at 6:30 p.m., please. Aurora crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. There was nothing to talk about. Reality had imposed itself with all its cruelty, and she wouldn't be responsible for destroying anyone's dreams, not even her own. But when she was leaving the hotel, she saw Nick leaning against his car, waiting for her. The look they exchanged was loaded with a sadness that neither of them knew how to express. You heard, he said simply. I heard. Aurora, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Nick. She's right. This was a mistake from the beginning. Was it? He approached. Because for me, it was the truest thing I've ever lived. The words hit her like knives. But it's not enough, is it? In the end, you'll always have to choose between your world and mine. What if I chose you? For a moment, Aurora allowed herself to dream of that possibility. Then reality came back with full force. You would lose everything, your company, your reputation, your future, and I would be blamed for it for the rest of my life. She shook her head. I can't carry that weight, Nick. So that's it? You're going to give up on us without a fight? There is no us. The lie came out with difficulty. There never was. Aurora turned away before he could respond. but not before seeing the pain spread across his face. As she walked to the bus stop, she knew she had made the right decision for the wrong reason. The next morning, she found an official transfer order on her desk. She would be reassigned to a hotel in the chain in Queens, on the other side of the city, far from Nick, far from temptation. The war had begun, and the first shots had already been fired. Aurora just didn't know yet that Vivian Moore was only beginning her attack and that the worst was yet to come. The bomb exploded on a Tuesday morning in a headline that made the entire country stop to read, "Scandal in the Tavara Empire. Tycoon abandons $1 million meeting to save housekeeper in the middle of the night." Gossip and Business magazine had obtained photos from the night of the leak. Grainy but unmistakable images. Nick, with his sleeves rolled up, working alongside Aurora, the two embracing in the empty hall. The passionate kiss caught by a security camera that someone had hacked. Aurora found out when Carla burst into her room at the hotel in Queens, where she had been transferred 3 days earlier with a stack of magazines in her hands. "Aurora, you need to see this." The article was devastating. It wasn't limited to just the photos. There was a complete investigation into Aurora's life, her address, the financial situation of her family, even interviews with former colleagues who, seduced by money, invented stories about her inappropriate behavior and her unbridled ambitions. Sources close to the hotel reveal that Aurora Mendez, 35, had been planning for months to get close to billionaire Nick Tavara, said one of the most painful passages. Known among employees as ambitious and calculating, she allegedly orchestrated several casual encounters until she gained the attention of her boss. Aurora felt nauseous as she read. Every word was a lie, but they sounded so convincing, so well constructed, that even she began to doubt her own motivations. The article ended with a statement attributed to a source close to the company. "Mr. Tavara is deeply sorry for the episode. He is taking the necessary measures to ensure that this type of embarrassment does not happen again. The employee in question has already been transferred and will be fired soon." Aurora let the magazine fall to the floor, her hands trembling. Her cell phone rang. It was Nick. "Aurora, don't believe a word of that article. It's all lies, all orchestrated by Vivian." "Is it?" Her voice came out broken. "Because to me it seems pretty convincing. You know it's not true, do I?" Aurora got up, walking to the small window of the room. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I was deluding myself, thinking that a person like me could have something real with a person like you." "Aurora, don't do this." "Do what, Nick?" "Face reality." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You know what hurts the most? It's not being called greedy or calculating. It's knowing that you're going to have to deny me publicly to save your reputation." The silence on the other end of the line was too eloquent. "You've already done that, haven't you?" Aurora whispered. "You've already given statements denying any involvement with me." The legal department said it was necessary. "Of course they did." Aurora closed her eyes. "Goodbye." "Nick." "Aurora, wait." She hung up. On the other side of the city, Nick punched the office wall so hard that Robert, who had been rehired after redeeming himself by providing information to the press, jumped out of his chair. "Sir, maybe we should focus on containing the damage." "Shut up, Robert." Nick turned to him, his eyes bloodshot with anger. "You sold information to Vivian, didn't you?" Robert paled. "Sir, Get out of my sight!" After Robert ran out, Nick called his lawyer. "Marcus, I need to sue the magazine. Defamation, invasion of privacy, everything. Nick, technically they didn't lie about the main facts. You were with her, you kissed. Then find another way. Buy the magazine, buy the editor, I don't care. And what about the employee?" Nick closed his eyes. "What about her?" Her family is being harassed by reporters. They photograph the house, the elderly grandmother. The situation is becoming unsustainable. Maybe it's better. Better what? To offer her compensation to leave the city, discreetly, for the good of everyone. The suggestion hit Nick like a slap in the face. You're suggesting that I pay her to disappear? I'm suggesting that you protect both of you from further exposure. That afternoon, Aurora received a visit from a man in an expensive suit who identified himself as a lawyer for Tavara Holdings. Miss Mendez, I came to make a proposal. He opened a briefcase and took out a pre-filled check. The amount was enough for Aurora to never have to work again. Mr. Tavara would like to offer this compensation for the inconvenience caused. In exchange, you would sign a confidentiality agreement and move to another city. We suggest upstate, New York. We have already identified a small property where you could live comfortably with your family. Aurora looked at the check as if it were a poisonous snake. He wants to buy me. He wants to protect you. In the same way he protected the maid Connie when he was a child. The lawyer blinked, surprised. Excuse me. Nothing. Aurora tore the check in half. Tell Mr. Tavara that Aurora Mendez is not for sale. Miss, be reasonable. The situation will only get worse. The press won't stop. Then let them not stop. Aurora got up. I'm not the one with an empire to protect. After the lawyer left, Aurora sat on the bed and cried until she had no more tears. She knew she was making the most difficult decision of her life, but she couldn't accept Nick's money. It would be like confirming everything the press said about her. That night, Grandma Eulalia called, her voice trembling with concern. Honey, there are people taking pictures of our house. The neighbors are commenting. Caio came home from school crying because the classmates are mocking him. Aurora closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her choices crushing not only her, but her entire family. Grandma, maybe it's better if you go to Aunt Connie's house in the countryside for a few weeks. And you, honey, I'm going to stay here and figure this out. But Aurora didn't know how to figure it out. She shook her head. I can't. I carry that weight, Nick. So that's it. You're going to give up on us without a fight. There is no us. The lie came out with difficulty. There never was. Aurora turned away before he could respond, but not before seeing the pain spread across his face. As she walked to the bus stop, she knew she had made the right decision for the wrong reason. The next morning, she found an official transfer order on her desk. She would be reassigned to a hotel in the chain in Syracuse, on the other side of the state, far from Nick, far from temptation. The war had begun, and the first shots had already been fired. Aurora just didn't know yet that Vivian Moore was only beginning her attack, and that the worst was yet to come. The bomb exploded on a Tuesday morning, in a headline that made the entire country stop to read. Scandal in the Tavara Empire. Tycoon abandons $1 million meeting to save. Housekeeper in the middle of the night. Gossip and Business magazine had obtained photos from the night of the leak. Grainy but unmistakable images. Nick with his sleeves rolled up working alongside Aurora, the two embracing in the empty hall, the passionate kiss caught by a security camera that someone had hacked. Aurora found out when Carla burst into her room at the hotel in Syracuse, where she had been transferred 3 days earlier, with a stack of magazines in her hands. Aurora, you need to see this. The article was devastating. It wasn't limited to just the photos. There was a complete investigation into Aurora's life, her address, the financial situation of her family, even interviews with former colleagues who, seduced by money, invented stories about her inappropriate behavior and her unbridled ambitions. Sources close to the hotel reveal that Aurora Mendez, 35, had been planning for months to get close to billionaire Nick Tavara, said one of the most painful passages. Known among employees as ambitious and calculating, she allegedly orchestrated several casual encounters until she gained the attention of her boss. Aurora felt nauseous as she read. Every word was a lie, but they sounded so convincing, so well constructed that even she began to doubt her own motivations. The article ended with a statement attributed to a source close to the company. Mr. Tavera is deeply sorry for the episode. He is taking the necessary measures to ensure that this type of embarrassment does not happen again. The employee in question has already been transferred and will be fired soon. Aurora let the magazine fall to the floor, her hands trembling. Her cell phone rang. It was Nick. Aurora, don't believe a word of that article. It's all lies, all orchestrated by Vivian. Is it? Her voice came out broken. Because to me it seems pretty convincing. You know it's not true. Do I? Aurora got up, walking to the small window of the room. Maybe she's right. Maybe I was deluding myself, thinking that a person like me could have something real with a person like you. Aurora, don't do this. Do what, Nick? Face reality. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. You know what hurts the most? It's not being called greedy or calculating. It's knowing that you're going to have to deny me publicly to save your reputation. The silence on the other end of the line was too eloquent. You've already done that, haven't you? Aurora whispered. You've already given statements denying any involvement with me. The legal department said it was necessary. Of course they did. Aurora closed her eyes. Goodbye, Nick. Aurora, wait. She hung up. On the other side of the city, Nick punched the office wall so hard that Robert, who had been rehired after redeeming himself by providing information to the press, jumped out of his chair. Sir, maybe we should focus on containing the damage. Shut up, Robert. Nick turned. To him, his eyes bloodshot with anger. You sold information to Vivian, didn't you? Robert paled. Sir, Get out of my sight! After Robert ran out, Nick called his lawyer. Marcus, I need to sue the magazine. Defamation, invasion of privacy, everything. Nick, technically, they didn't lie about the main facts. You were with her, you kissed. Then find another way. Buy the magazine, buy the editor, I don't care. And what about the employee? Nick closed his eyes. What about her? Her family is being harassed by reporters. They photographed the house, the elderly grandmother. The situation is becoming unsustainable. Maybe it's better what? To offer her compensation to leave the city, discreetly, for the good of everyone. The suggestion hit Nick like a slap in the face. You're suggesting that I pay her to disappear. I'm suggesting that you protect both of you from further exposure. That afternoon, Aurora received a visit from a man in an expensive suit who identified himself as a lawyer for Tavera Holdings. Miss Mendez, I came to make a proposal. He opened a briefcase and took out a pre-filled check. The amount was enough for Aurora to never have to work again. Mr. Tavera would like to offer this compensation for the inconvenience caused. In exchange, you would sign a confidentiality agreement and move to another town. We suggest somewhere in the Berkshires. We have already identified a small property where you could live comfortably with your family. Aurora looked at the check as if it were a poisonous snake. He wants to buy me. He wants to protect you. In the same way, he protected the maid. Connie when he was a child? The lawyer blinked, surprised. Excuse me? Nothing. Aurora tore the check in half. Tell Mr. Tavera that Aurora Mendez is not for sale. Miss, be reasonable. The situation will only get worse. The press won't stop. Then let them not stop. Aurora got up. I'm not the one with an empire to protect. After the lawyer left, Aurora sat on the bed and cried until she had no more tears. She knew she was making the most difficult decision of her life, but she couldn't accept Nick's money. It would be like confirming everything the press said about her. That night, Grandma Eulalia called, her voice trembling with concern. "Honey, there are people taking pictures of our house. The neighbors are commenting. Kaio came home from school crying because the classmates are mocking him." Aurora closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her choices crushing not only her, but her entire family. "Grandma, maybe it's better if you go to Aunt Connie's house in the countryside for a few weeks." "And you, honey?" "I'm going to stay here and figure this out." But Aurora didn't know how to figure it out. She didn't know how to fight against a system that saw her as disposable, against a powerful woman like Vivian who could destroy reputations with a phone call, against a world that would never accept her as an equal. The next morning, she found another envelope under her door. This time it wasn't from Nick's company. It was from Vivian Moore. "Dear Aurora," the handwritten letter read, "I imagine you're going through difficult times. I would like to offer a solution to your problems. Meet me today at 3 p.m. at the Plaza Hotel in Midtown. I have a proposal that may interest both of us. With affection, Vivian." Aurora crumpled the letter, then unfolded it and read it again. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she was sitting at one of the tables of the historic hotel, waiting for the woman who had destroyed her life. When Vivian arrived, elegant and smiling as if they were old friends, Aurora felt a cold anger settling in her chest. "Aurora, darling, what a pleasure to meet you in person." "What do you want, Vivian?" "Straight to the point, I like that." Vivian sat down, ordering coffee from the waiter. "I want to end this unpleasant situation in a way that benefits us all." "Get to it." "Very well. You're going to give an exclusive interview to Gossip and Business, confessing that it was all a misunderstanding, that you were deluded by Nick's attention, that there was never a real relationship, that you are ashamed of what happened." Vivian smiled. "In exchange, I guarantee that the persecution of your family will stop immediately." And if I refuse?" "Ah, darling." Vivian leaned forward. "You won't refuse, because if you refuse, I'll make sure this story continues to yield articles for months. Your grandmother, your siblings, all of you will become celebrities for the wrong reasons. And in the end, Nick will still have to choose between you and his empire. And we both know what choice he will make." "Exactly." Vivian leaned back, satisfied. "So, accept saving the dignity of all of us." Aurora looked out the window of the cafe, seeing people passing on the street, living their normal lives, unaware that there, at that table, her life was being negotiated like a commodity. "I accept," she said finally, "but with one condition." "Which one?" "I want Nick to know that it was your idea. I want him to know exactly what kind of woman you are." Vivian laughed. "Darling, he already knows, and yet he will accept my help to get rid of this problem." That night, Aurora recorded the interview that would be her social death sentence. She confirmed that she had been deluded, that there was never anything serious between her and Nick, that she deeply regretted the embarrassment caused. When the interview aired 2 days later, Nick was in his office watching TV with a broken heart. He saw the woman he loved humiliate herself publicly to protect him and her own family. And for the first time in years, Nick Tavara cried. Aurora, in turn, packed her bags and left New York on the same morning that the interview was broadcast. She didn't say where she was going, not even to Grandma Eulalia. She simply disappeared, taking with her only the pain of a love that may have been too real for a world that was too fake. In the letter she left for Nick, delivered by Carla 2 weeks later, there was only one sentence. "Sometimes loving someone is having the courage to let them go." And so, the love between the housekeeper and the tycoon came to an end, not with an explosion, but with a whisper of sacrifice that would echo in the hearts of both forever. 6 months later, Aurora was living in a small town in the Berkshires called Stockbridge. She had rented a simple house with the money she had managed to save in recent years, and Grandma Eulalia, Caio, and Luana had moved there as well, fleeing the harassment of the press in New York. The routine was simple. Aurora worked as a tutor. For children in the town, Caio had managed to get a scholarship to the local college to study medicine, and Luana continued to excel in her studies. Grandma Eulalia tended a small garden in the backyard and seemed to have rejuvenated away from the stress of the big city. But Aurora wasn't the same. Her eyes had lost their spark, and she moved through life like a ghost of herself. At night, when she thought no one was watching, she would stand on the porch, looking at the stars and unconsciously touching the place where Nick had kissed her forehead on that last night at the hotel. It was on a Thursday afternoon that everything changed. Aurora was in the small town library, helping a child with homework, when an elegant woman of about 50 approached her table. "Excuse me, are you Aurora Mendez?" Aurora looked up immediately. On guard, 6 months had taught her to distrust well-dressed strangers. "It depends on who's asking." The woman smiled gently. "My name is Helen Carter. I'm a retired investigative journalist. I would very much like to talk to you." "About what?" Aurora stood up, instinctively protective. "If it's about what happened in New York." "It's exactly about that," Helen approached, "because I believe you were the victim of a very well-orchestrated scheme." Aurora studied the woman's face. There was something in her eyes, a sincerity that she had learned to recognize. That made her hesitate. "I have nothing to say." "I know. You signed a confidentiality agreement, didn't you?" Helen smiled at the surprise on Aurora's face. "Don't worry. I didn't come here as a journalist. I came as someone who has been manipulated in the same way." Aurora sat down slowly. "What do you mean?" Helen pulled up a chair. 20 years ago, I was an economics reporter at the Wall Street Journal. I was investigating irregularities at a construction company when I met the owner, a married, powerful, charismatic man. We fell deeply in love. Aurora felt a chill in her stomach. His wife found out and did exactly what Vivian Moore did to you, orchestrated a scandal in the press, painted me as a money-grabbing opportunist, destroyed my reputation. I was fired, publicly humiliated, forced to leave New York. Helen paused. The difference is, I didn't have the courage to fight. Why are you telling me this? Because for the past 6 months I've been investigating Vivian Moore on my own, and I've discovered things that will shock you. Aurora shook her head. I don't want to get involved in this anymore. Neither did I, but then I found out that she did the same thing with 5 other women in the last 10 years. Helen took a folder out of her bag. All of them became involved with men that Vivian considered important to her business, and all of them were systematically destroyed. Despite herself, Aurora leaned forward. 5 women, 5 that I was able to identify. There are probably Tatuka more. Helen opened the folder. Look at this. The photos showed women of different ages, all with the same expression of pain that Aurora recognized in the mirror. There were also newspaper clippings, documents, printed emails. This is Marina Sanchez. She was the secretary to a congressman that Vivian wanted to influence to obtain permits for her hotels. This is Julia Rogers, a university professor who fell in love with a federal judge. Helen showed the photos one by one. The pattern is always the same. Relationship discovered, blackmail, scandal in the media, public humiliation. Aurora touched one of the photos, a blonde woman who couldn't have been more than 25 years old. What happened to them? Marina committed suicide 3 years ago. The revelation hit Aurora like a punch. Julia developed severe depression and never managed to work again. The others, Helen sighed, live hidden, ashamed, believing that they deserve what happened to them. Aurora felt tears welling up in her eyes. Why does she do this? Power, control. Vivian Moore is a sociopath who uses the destruction of other women as a business tool. Helen leaned forward, but this time she made a mistake. What mistake? She messed with the wrong woman. Helen smiled. Aurora, you weren't chosen randomly. Vivian discovered that Nick was genuinely in love with you, and that terrified her. Why? Because for the first time in her life, she couldn't manipulate him completely. Nick turned down 3 marriage proposals from her in the last 5 years. He refused partnerships that would benefit her. And when she realized that he was really in love with you, Helen made a dramatic pause. She panicked. Aurora shook her head. That doesn't change anything. I'm still a housekeeper, he's still a billionaire. Aurora, do you know what Nick did after you disappeared? I don't want to know. He sold 60% of the company's stock. Aurora looked up, surprised. Sold it to foreign investors, completely. Leaving Tavara Holdings control, Vivian lost all the influence she had over him. Helen smiled. He's been looking for you for 6 months, hired private detectives, placed ads in newspapers across the country. Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that what? That you were humiliated, lied about, forced to debase yourself? Helen stood up. Aurora, you have the chance to do something that I never had the courage to do. You can fight. Against whom? Against what? Against Vivian. Against the system that allows women like her to destroy women like us. Helen placed a hand on Aurora's shoulder. I have evidence, witnesses, documents, but I need someone with the courage to face all this publicly. Aurora looked again at the photos of the other victims, thinking of Marina Sanchez, who had given up on living. What exactly are you proposing? A press conference, you, me, and 2 more of the other women who have agreed to speak. We will expose Vivian Moore for who she really is. Helen paused. And we're going to give you the chance to tell your real version of events. Aurora was silent for a long moment, her heart beating fast. And Nick, he doesn't even know I'm here. This is your choice, Aurora. Your fight. That night, Aurora walked through the small town, thinking about Helen's proposal. She remembered the pain on Nick's face when she lied in the interview, remembered the tears he tried to hide when she said that there had never been an us. She also remembered the young Marina who had chosen death instead of fighting. When she got home, she found Grandma Eulalia waiting for her on the porch. You're going to do it, aren't you? The elderly woman asked gently. How do you know? Because you have the same eyes as your father when he decided to face an injustice. Grandma Eulalia smiled. And because it's the right thing to do. Aurora sat down next to her grandmother. What if it goes wrong? What if she destroys me completely this time? Then at least you will have fought, and sometimes, honey, the courage to fight is more important than victory. The next morning, Aurora called Helen Carter. I accept. Let's do this press conference. Are you sure? Aurora looked out the window at Kaio leaving for college and Luana studying in the yard. She thought of all the women that Vivian had destroyed, of all those who could still be destroyed. I am, but I'm not going to do this alone. Of course not. No, Aurora interrupted. I want Nick to know. I want him to have the chance to choose if he wants to be on my side this time. Helen was silent for a moment. Aurora, do you understand that he may not? I understand, but he deserves to know the truth. And I deserve to know if the man I fell in love with really exists. 2 weeks later, the press conference was scheduled. The location, the event hall of the Grandview Hotel, the same one where Aurora and Nick had worked together on the night that changed everything. The final battle was about to begin, and this time, Aurora wouldn't run. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Aurora arrived at the Grandview Hotel at 11 in the morning. accompanied by Helen Carter and the other two women who had agreed to speak, Julia Rogers and Patricia Cole, a former congressional aide who had also been a victim of Vivian. The event hall, the same one where she and Nick had worked together on that night that changed everything, was being prepared with chairs for journalists, TV cameras, and microphones. Aurora felt a pang in her chest as she recognized the place, the memories of that early morning coming back with full force. "Are you okay?" asked Helen, noticing her paleness. "I'm fine." Aurora took a deep breath. "Let's do this." At 2 o'clock sharp, the hall was packed. Journalists from all the major outlets in the country crowded into the chairs. Cameras rolled, photographers snapped flashes. Aurora, sitting at the main table, felt her hands tremble slightly. Helen took the microphone first, explaining her investigation into Vivian Moore's pattern of behavior. She presented documents, emails, witnesses. The case against Vivian was solid, devastating. Julia spoke about how she had lost her job at the university and developed depression. Patricia told how she had been blackmailed and publicly humiliated. And then it was Aurora's turn. She approached the microphone with her heart pounding, looked at the crowd of expectant faces, and began. "My name is Aurora Mendez. 6 months ago, you knew me as the housekeeper who seduced billionaire Nick Tavara. Today, I came to tell you the truth." Her voice, initially trembling, gained strength as she spoke. She told about the genuine encounters with Nick, about how they fell in love, about the night of the leak when they worked together. She explained how Vivian blackmailed her, how she was forced to lie in the previous interview. "I'm not a gold digger," she said, her eyes shining with determination. "I'm a woman who fell in love and was punished for it, just like Marina Sanchez, who preferred to die than live with the humiliation, just like Julia, Patricia, and how many others who maybe will never have the courage to tell their stories." It was then that the doors of the hall burst open. Vivian Moore entered like a storm, followed by her lawyers and aides. She was impeccably dressed, but her eyes shone with barely contained fury. "This press conference is a sham," she shouted, making the journalists turn with their cameras. "These women are desperate liars trying to make money from defamation." "Vivian," Helen stood up calmly, "how nice of you to come. Now you can answer the accusations personally." "What accusations?" Vivian laughed loudly. "From a washed-up journalist and a bunch of opportunists. Please." Aurora stood up too, surprising everyone with her firm posture. "Do you have the courage to look me in the eye and deny that you blackmailed me?" "I saved Nick from making the biggest mistake of his life." Vivian approached the table, losing her composure. "Do you think he would really be interested in a tiki housekeeper if it weren't for pity or boredom?" The cruelty of the words hit Aurora, but she didn't back down. "Maybe you should ask him personally. He's not even here. Where is your great love now?" It was then that a familiar voice echoed through the hall. "Here." All heads turned. Nick Tavara was standing at the entrance to the hall, wearing a dark suit, his eyes fixed on Aurora. At his side was Robert, but not the treacherous Robert that everyone knew. This was a different man, carrying a briefcase and a recorder. "Nick," Vivian paled, "what are you doing here? I'm going to do what I should have done 6 months ago." He walked to the table without taking his eyes off Aurora. "I'm going to tell the truth." Vivian tried to regain her composure. "Nick, don't be ridiculous. You're over that phase. Your company is better without this scandal." "My company?" Nick smiled bitterly. "Vivian, you don't know anything about my company for the last 6 months." Robert approached the table and placed the recorder on it. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, what you are about to hear is a recording made 3 days ago when Ms. Vivian Moore contacted me to try to bribe me again." He pressed play. Vivian's voice came out clear from the speakers. "Robert, I need You to convince the journalists not to pay attention to this ridiculous press conference. I can pay very well for it, like I paid for your work in the case of the housekeeper. Ms. Moore, are you asking me to bribe the press? I'm asking you to protect your own interests. After all, you were the one who gave me the information about Nick and that woman. If that comes to light, the recording continued for another 5 minutes, with Vivian openly admitting to having orchestrated the entire scandal, to having paid for false information, to having blackmailed Aurora. The silence in the hall was total. The cameras continued filming, but no one dared to speak. Vivian was livid. This is a setup, a fabrication. It's the truth, said Robert, approaching the microphone. And I can prove everything. I have emails, bank transfers, recordings of all our conversations from the last 6 months. Why? Vivian turned to him, furious. Why are you doing this? Because I saw what my betrayal did to 2 innocent people. Because I can't sleep at night knowing that I destroyed a true love for money. Nick finally approached Aurora, who was immobile, trying to process everything that was happening. Aurora, he said softly, making her look up at him. Will you forgive me? For what? The question came out in a whisper. For taking so long to fight for you. For letting fear and pride speak louder than love. He extended his hand. For not coming after you on the same day you left. Aurora looked at the outstretched hand, then at his face. She saw tears that he wasn't trying to hide. She saw the same vulnerability that she had seen that night when he told about the scar. And now, she asked, what happens now? Now I do what I should have done 6 months ago. Nick knelt before her, right there, in front of all the cameras, of all the journalists, of the entire country watching on television. Aurora Mendez, will you marry me? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of camera flashes. Aurora looked at the man kneeling before her. Not the billionaire, not the tycoon, but the man who had told her his secrets, who had worked alongside her in the early morning, who had kissed her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Stand up, she said softly. Nick obeyed, confused. I don't want you to kneel to me. Never again. Aurora touched his face. I want us to stand together as equals. Is that a yes? Aurora smiled, the first genuine smile in 6 months. It's a yes. When he kissed her, right there in front of all the cameras, the hall exploded in applause. Even some journalists had tears in their eyes. Vivian, realizing that she had completely lost, tried to leave discreetly, but was intercepted by 2 police officers that Helen had called based on the evidence collected. 6 months later, Aurora and Nick were married in a small and intimate ceremony in the town of Stockbridge, with Grandma Eulalia blessing the union under the same tree where Aurora used to read to the children. Nick had used the money from the sale of shares to create the Aurora Mendez Foundation, which offered scholarships and support to women victims of psychological violence and blackmail. Aurora became the executive director, using her experience to help other women find the courage to fight. Vivian Moore was convicted of blackmail, racketeering, and corruption. Her fortune was confiscated, and she is serving time in a maximum security prison. Robert moved to the countryside where he opened a small accounting firm. Sometimes he sends birthday cards to Aurora and Nick, always signed with regret and eternal gratitude. And every night, when Aurora and Nick lie down in their simple but love-filled home, she touches the scar on his wrist and he kisses the invisible mark that life left on her heart. Because they discovered that true love is not about perfection or social status. It's about 2 people who choose to stand together, facing the world as equals, transforming scars into wisdom and pain into strength. Love had won, not because it was easy, but because it was real enough to be worth every tear, every struggle, every moment of courage needed to protect it. And when Aurora sleeps in his arms, Nick whispers in the dark the words he can now say without fear. Thank you for teaching me that true power is not in conquering the world, but in having the courage to be vulnerable with the right person. And Aurora, even sleeping, smiles, because she has finally found her place in the world, not as an invisible housekeeper, not as the wife of a billionaire, but as Aurora Mendez, a strong, courageous, and loved woman exactly for who she is.